We are back. Your pals are back. The professionals and animal lovers show. The journey began September 1st, 2021. That's really when this started. It actually started. That's the first show we ever did. That's when that journey began. But it started the summer of 21 when Val and I started talking about this show. What is this show? Well, here's what we're doing. We're amplifying the message that the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. We want to support one another in business and in advocacy by building a compassionate network together so that everyone wins.
Especially the animals.
How do we achieve this? We achieve this by doing this weekly radio show, podcast, building a society of animal lovers and the nonprofits that work with animal lovers, the rescues, the shelters, and these organizations that protect and shelter and advocate on behalf of animals. But really, Valerie, we do three things on this show. Do you know what those three things are?
I do.
Tell me.
We learn because we bring on fantastic people, experts who in their field, as well as people that are involved in advocacy. We educate. So we're educating you. I learn every week. I know Tommy's learned a lot as well. And then we advocate and take our efforts to legislators in an attempt to get positive reform done legislatively for the animals. No big deal, just changing the world.
No big deal. Changing the world. No big deal. Talk about assembly people and legislators. Shout out to Assembly member Linda Rosenthal. It was awesome to have you on the program last week. We're so glad you're a friend of the program, as the people in the business would say. So, we talk about learning, we talk about education. Before we introduce our friend Laura Garber, who's with us today, who's certainly going to drop some knowledge, especially on me, because I got a brand new puppy. Maybe you haven't heard. His name is Cheeto. He's right there in his crate on the floor. I think he's sleeping. We might see him later on. But hashtag where's Cheeto now? Hashtag in the attic. But really, I need a lot. We have a lot to learn about raising a little puppy. Because it's been a long time since I've had a puppy, so we're going to learn. But before we have Laura drop some knowledge on us and really talk about the difference between what I think is what we really all need to be focused on, which is positive reinforcement training versus aversive punishment style training, we're going to learn all about that today. But before we do, Val, I know you have some announcements, so why don't you take it away? Tell folks what's going
on. All right. Yes. So first of all, we have a couple of events that we want to mention. You can find the event on our Facebook page, the Professionals and Animal Lovers Show. May 3rd, we have a virtual pet working event.
She did the bunny ears. If you're only listening, she did the air quotes bunny ears. Networking, all right?
Which is basically just networking for pet parents and animal lovers. So that means that if you have a rescue and you want to get in front of a bunch of animal lovers on the Zoom call and tell them about the great work that you're doing, please join us. We have a discounted ticket actually for rescues. It's like $10. If you're a professional, if you're a lawyer and you want to meet, realtors or whoever, we're going to have all of these great people. They have one thing in common. We love animals and we want everyone to get to know each other so that we can support each other. Then June 13th in Plainview, New York, we have a phenomenal panel discussion where we're addressing the feral cat crisis, which is very prevalent in Long Island, New York. And we have on our panel is Lisa Yeager, who is, she runs Yeager's Run, and she's very boots on the ground. TNR's over 200 cats and kittens every year. We have Aaron Etan Meyer, who sits on the New York State Committee of Animal Law. And we have Jenny Luca, who represents TNR Task Force. So we're really going to not only have a discussion, but we're inviting local legislators because they have to be part of the solution. And we're going to try to put a dent in this problem. So last but not least, Compassion Awards, October 11th, 2023. We have some phenomenal honorees. I can only mention one right now. Actually, I can mention two. Sorry, two. we have Assemblywoman Rosenthal, who is one of our honorees. She's
Where are your
carried-
pom-poms? Where are your pom-poms?
Hold
Seriously.
on.
I mean, you have pom-poms all the time. You're announcing the Compassion Awards. Oh, there's a pom-pom.
Sorry.
Thank
And I'm so excited to have her because she truly is the champion in terms of the New York State, legislative bodies. She's written and passed dozens of laws. She has dozens of laws right now proposed just to help the animals. She has a lot of other laws too, but I don't really pay attention to those much. Anyway, and we also are honoring as our business of the year. It's a new award. Contour Mortgage. Contour Mortgage is doing incredible things. They're training a service animal so that when he graduates or whatever, they're gifting him to one of our beloved veterans. And they pay for adoption fees. I just heard the cutest story. Their receptionist just adopted a Chihuahua mix something, and the owner just walked right over to her and was like, "How much is the adoption fee?" Done. So I mean, they're
of the company.
yeah. They're doing such great things. So anyway, we'll get to the oh, and they're also currently doing a donation drive for food and everything. They're benefiting a local rescue called Bobbing the Strays out of Freeport. So anyway, those are a couple of, just to whet the taste buds. We have these great events. We hope you come. And we have these phenomenal honorees because the goal is to get more people to say, hey, you know what, look at all the great work that Contour Mortgage is doing and Assemblywoman Rosenthal, and maybe more people will be inclined to find ways to help animals.
I absolutely love this. Back last year, I had no idea, no concept really of any of this work. And now I'm like way deep in this stuff. So it's kind of funny. And my guy Cheeto, that's, by the way, if you're checking him out on Instagram, that's his Instagram's my guy Cheeto. But he wouldn't even be here right now, Val, if it wasn't for us doing the show, to be honest. I really believe that. He's somewhere. He wouldn't be at it. All right.
All right, let's get to our phenomenal guest.
Let's do it. Certified dog trainer, behavior specialist, Laura Garber, professional member of the Association of Professional Dog Trainers. Certification, she's certified by the Certification Council of Professional Dog Trainers. And she is also, and we've learned about this before, a fear-free certified professional, a mentor trainer for Catch, which is an ABC dog. Catch has got to be an acronym. It's not in my notes right here, but I'm sure it is an acronym because I like those too. Pennsylvania SPCA. She's done programs for them in the town of Hempstead Animal Shelter here on Long Island. She believes in strengthening the bond between human and companion animals. I remember we had a doctor on the show, Dr. DeFranco or DeFrancis, a while back last year. And the thing I remember what he shared with us, Val, was it's not really about the animal's behavior. It's more about the people's behavior, right? I mean, right, Laura? I see everybody's nodding their head. So listen up, gang, and listen up to the gang who lives in this house who I'm talking to. It ain't about Cheeto's behavior. It's about our behavior. So we got to work on that. Laura, we are thrilled to have you. Valerie, get your pom-poms. Everybody on your feet. Laura Garber. Woo! And it's called Wolfgang Dog Training. Wolfgang.
Wolfgang. Yeah.
I love that. That second to last sentence sounds a lot like our mission statement about the bonds between human and animal connection. 100%.
Right.
Yeah. And this is such an important subject because I can speak for myself. We have neighbors and they recently, got a puppy and they asked us for a recommendation. And I said, look, the number one thing that you really want to look for is to make sure it's a positive reinforcement trainer or behaviorist. And I'll just disclose really quickly that growing up, when I had a dog named Kaiser, it's funny because my friends used to tease me and say, Kaiser who drank Budweiser, but he didn't. But anyway, the whole point is, my mom, I think my mom was kind of old school and, she grew up in a different country. When my dog did something that she didn't like, she would roll up a newspaper and swat the wall like really close to him and his tail would go under. And I just want to say that I remember getting so upset because I didn't want my dog to be scared. It's so upsetting to me. So anyway, let's get into it. Aversive training versus positive reinforcement training. Maybe we should start by defining aversive training. What does that exactly entail?
So aversive training means applying punishment or using punishment to correct behavior, right? And positive training is about reinforcing positive behavior. So, you know, that the story you tell about Kaiser is not unusual, especially, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago. That's the way dog training really happened. You know, it was through punishment-based training. And the fact is that then but the marine animal trainers were the ones that were actually leading the way in terms of using positive reinforcement training, right? They were using whistles to mark behaviors to say that, you know, that's what the goal behavior was, and reinforcing the animal for doing that. The fact is, you can't punish a whale, right? I mean, you don't have choke chains for a whale, and he's just going to swim away. So they were really the ones that turned the tables on the way dog trainers did it, because we started watching that and learning from that. And the fact is, there's no question that dogs will learn both ways, right? They will learn through positive reinforcement, and they will learn through the use of punishment. The question is whether their welfare is the same in both cases. And in preparation for this conversation, I went back over, you know, looking at studies from 2001 until now, and found over a dozen studies that were showing that dog welfare suffers as a result of using aversive techniques or using punishment as a training methodology.
I'm sure. And if you want to send me those studies or email, you know, I would love to also post that information, because I'll tell you something else. I think it's also, to me, they're one and the same. There's that connectivity that we just talked about, the bond between us and our pets. They're like our children. They're like our family. I hate it when my animals are afraid of anything. I get upset every time it thunders out, because I know my dog is thinking it's the end of the world, you know? So emotionally for us as well, I don't think that bodes well. And I'll say this too. I did some pet sitting during COVID, and I was just kind of like, I got to do something, right? So I did some pet sitting, and I did not take a customer because I was upset for their dogs. They had the electric collar thing, and they were saying I was going to stay at their house and sleep over while they were away. And they had 2 sheep dogs. And anyway, long story short, they had this plastic, I guess, battery operated, whatever it was, with a remote control. And they said, you don't even have to turn it on. As soon as they see it on the floor, they'll stay away automatically. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how fearful are they of this, you know, plastic cylinder thing? But they know if they get too close, it's going to hurt them. I'm like, I can't. So I didn't take that job. And
also, you're bringing up one of the side effects of the use of punishment is that you can actually get unintended results. So for instance, I've known dogs that were trained to an electronic collar on a fence, right? On a fence. And the fact is that one dog got scared about even going out the door. Yeah. He was scared to go into the yard because he associated being outside with punishment, right? Or for instance, using using pennies in a can. Very often people use pennies in a can. If a dog jumps up, puts his paws up on the counter, the pennies will drop on the floor and make a big noise and scares him away from jumping up on the counter, right? But I've known dogs to become afraid of going into the kitchen, right? So this is one of the key problems with using punishment-based training, is that you can get unintended results.
Yes.
Wow.
So we just talked, if I can go backwards for a second, we talked about sound, right? Loud sounds, or the newspaper rolled up, swatting a wall, the pennies in a can. We talked about electric collars and shock collars. What else? What are some other examples of aversive training? So hopefully if people can ask these questions, before they hire a trainer, they can hopefully avoid these techniques as well. Other than sound and shock collars.
Well, so there's also, we talked about the shock collar that is on an electronic fence, right? But there's also just the e-collar, right? Which is using a remote device so that you can punish the dog from afar using a remote, right? think about prong collars and
collars.
choke chains. Those are aversive, principles.
Mhm.
Hitting a dog with a newspaper, or yelling at a dog, saying a really strong no, or putting a dog's nose in his poop, for instance. That's based on
Oh my
aversion,
God, I
right?
hate that so
right?
much.
That's
Yeah.
punishment.
That's punishment, right?
It certainly is.
Because it makes the dog scared of the handler, right?
Yeah.
And it's humiliating. I mean, they also, I feel they know when they've done something wrong, or they know us, they know when we're disappointed.
I want to challenge that a little, if I could, because, and I don't put in the nose in the poop thing, but I want to say a couple things here. I want to, because I'm right now in this experience with a puppy who's 3.5 months old. So I have a lot of questions about this. But one quick comment before I even jump into the question is I want to make a shout out to Positive Possibilities Rescue. I'm sharing it on Facebook right now. Deborah Whitney, it's how we got Cheeto. It's how we met Cheeto. Cheeto's the name of the dog gang again. He's sleeping in the attic. But he one of the things we had to sign the contract, or part of the contract, was that we wouldn't use any of these devices, any of these electronic collars or anything like that.
Oh, that's
I
great.
hadn't even told you that, Val, until it's coming up right now. So that's
Yeah.
pretty special that's the way, like, I'm not even, if I wanted to, I've signed a contract now to not treat this animal. So even if it's, again, I guess somebody could say, well, how's anybody gonna know? The point is I know. Right. So now I'm thoughtful about that. Had I ever thought of using that, which I wouldn't, but had I thought of it, now I have to be more mindful. My question really is this, because Val, you say they know. I don't know, like, we're in this spot where, we brought Cheeto outside to do his business, and then, he does something, but then he comes in the house and he does his business again. Or he's, and it's like this weird, we're not putting his face in not putting in his poop or whatever. But the point of the matter is, the challenge is they don't know really, like,
Well, he's a baby.
They don't know.
but I just mean,
Yeah.
like, they don't know until, like, what I'm grasping at, Laura, and we need training, so this could be perfect. I'm a prospect, haha, I'm a prospect, but like, we're at that point where, like, we've tried different things, like we've left him in the crate all, like, most of the day, except we take him out, and then he goes back in the crate, because that's what we were, like, Googling and whatever. My wife especially was trying to figure out, like, because he was having all these accidents. Well, then, although to him they're not accidents, he's got to go and he doesn't know where else to go. But
so, and think about that, when you need to go to the bathroom and you do, right, you feel better, right? And so he inadvertently gets reinforced for going to the bathroom anywhere he goes, whether it's inside or outside.
Because his body is telling him,
and he feels better after doing it, right? So the one difference you can make is that you make sure that when you're outside with him and he goes to the bathroom, you give him treats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 treats to say, awesome job, this is where you want to do it. And then, as you say, you're going to supervise him a lot when he's in the house. So there's also something that I talk about called puppy time chunking.
Okay, tell me that.
So a time chunk is, he comes out of his crate, he goes out to the bathroom, immediately out to the bathroom, gets reinforced for that, right? And then you play a fun game with him, maybe take him for a little walk, do whatever, get some exercise out there, right? So that when he comes back inside, he's pooped out, right? Yeah. Then he goes back into the crate for a puzzle toy, like a Kong toy or whatever it is, and a nap. Right. And that is your chunk. And in a tiny dog like you're, a tiny puppy, a young puppy like yours, that chunk is going to be very short. Maybe it's only 2 hours long. He comes out of the crate, goes out to the bathroom, gets a bunch of exercise, goes back into the crate for a puzzle toy and a nap. And that whole thing is 2 hours long, and it's happening multiple times throughout the day. Right. As he ages, he's going to have greater stamina, so he can exercise for longer, but he's also going to sleep for longer. So your chunk is going to be the same. But it's just going to be fewer of them throughout the day. When you do this, he's learning all of the essential things he needs to learn, right? First, he's learning that going outside to the bathroom is the right place to go. He's learning that being outside is where exciting stuff happens, where he gets all of his exercise, right? So when he goes back in the house, we want his being in the house to be his off switch, right? Because we want dogs to be restful, not crazy and maniacal in the house, right?
Right.
When he goes back inside, he's nice and pooped out. He goes back into his crate. He's learning his crate is an off switch, right? He's learning also that his crate is a great place to be, because every time he goes there, he gets this puzzle toy to work away on, right? He's learning to chew on the right things, because when he's in the crate, he has available to him those puzzle toys, the things that he should be chewing on.
Mhm.
So he is really learning all of his essential lessons just by chunking like this.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah. And,
Where-
you know,
where
I
were you
will
like a
say.
month ago, when we needed you a month ago.
That's okay. You still got time.
We got time.
You got time.
Yeah, I think so. I feel also that I guess this would qualify as actually a negative thing to do, but I remember when Jovi was a puppy, and at the time, Barry and I lived in an apartment. We had just moved in together, and he was scratching up the carpet. Like he was like diggy, diggy, diggy. So we were told to spray vinegar on the carpet, and then he would avoid it, which is true. But then our apartment started smelling like vinegar. I was like, I don't know if this is something I like, you know, but is that considered aversive? The spray
No.
of like a scent?
No,
Okay.
using a spray bottle on him would have been aversive. Using something that's a deterrent like that is not aversive. It is not punishment based, right? You're not punishing him. You're just making it a less attractive place to go, right?
Okay. Yeah. And
So-
then I was like, what are we going to spray the whole carpet with vinegar?
Yeah, and I actually thought where you were leading to was that you were told to, spritz him with water for doing it. And the problem is that is another reason why punishment, it has damaging effects, right? Because now, for one thing, you may not always have that spray bottle right next to you. So you're not going to be consistent in the number of in doing it, right? And the important thing about punishment is that it needs to be consistent, because if sometimes you do it and sometimes you don't do it, he doesn't know what to expect, and therefore it's not predictable. And then the other problem with it is that punishment needs to be impersonal, because if he says, when mommy's around and she sees me do this, I get in trouble, it changes his relationship with mommy, right? So those are two pitfalls of using punishment.
Let me ask you a question. I've heard, I've seen and read, there are some trainers who claim that they use both. They use positive and negative, and it depends on the dog. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. And so they often call themselves balance trainers. And that sounds so holistic, doesn't it? It sounds, but really, a balance trainer is using aversion, right? Is using correction. And so, while we're on the topic of that, then let's talk about, I told you, there are over a dozen studies, and I made a summary of what the ill effects to dog welfare are as a result of this. Dogs that were trained by aversive techniques were more likely to show stress signals and to have high cortisol levels. Cortisol is a stress hormone, right? So first, that there's more likely to have show stress signals and have high cortisol levels. They showed impeded learning and inquisitive behavior. So they suffered from that. They were less inquisitive in their environment because of it. They showed pessimism in ambiguous situations where they weren't quite sure of the outcome. They assumed that the outcome would be. They may had a pessimistic outlook on that. They were less playful, less interactive, higher excitability levels, more likely to develop behavior problems, right? And then more likely to express aggressive behavior, either family-directed aggression, aggression directed towards strangers, or redirected aggression. So that shows that even though aversive training may be effective, it is not in the welfare of the animal to use it, especially when we have an alternative that dogs don't suffer consequences like this.
And the efficacy of each. I mean, Laura, I'm hearing you loud and clear. So our point here, and we have a comment, I'll read it in a second, from a friend of ours on Facebook. But your point is the positive feedback is just as effective, if not better effective. I mean, you can have a much more well-rounded or less stressed animal and pet in the house than someone who's afraid of you all the time, right? Like, so there's no drop off in using positive versus the aversion, right?
And as a matter of fact, there was a study, and actually I couldn't find it yesterday when I was looking for it, but it was from a couple of years ago, and it had a large population of dogs, like 2,000 or 3,000 dogs in it. Half of them were trained by aversive trainers, professional aversive trainers. Half of them were trained by professional positive trainers. When returned to their owners, all of them were equally happy with the result, right? Which is interesting. They were, there was nobody suffered a consequence from that. However, the dogs that were trained through aversive techniques tended to stay 5 feet or farther away from their handler.
Mm.
So they didn't want to get close to their handler. So this is really interesting because
oh my God, that's so sad.
Yeah. So when one of the experiences I had when I was working at the Hempstead shelter a few years ago, I was the head of the behavior department there. I built a behavior program there, and at the time there was an aversive trainer that we would take dogs that had issues, behavior issues that would show up in the shelter, and we would hire trainers to foster the dog and work with the dog and to see whether is this behavior caused by the shelter environment, or is it a real behavior that we need to really worry about in a home? And in this one case, there was an aversive trainer that came in to be the foster, and I was pretty upset by watching the way he was handling the dog. And my manager at the time had said, "You've got to understand that punishment-based training is just a flip side of the training coin, and it's just as valid." And I decided that I wanted to prove that that positive training and punishment-based training should not be on the same coin. Right. And so what I did was I ran an experiment with the volunteers at the shelter at the time, and I had all the volunteers come into the room, and I selected 2 of the volunteers to be my test cases, right? And I asked them to leave the room, and I told everybody else, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to train these 2 people to do a behavior. And the first one I'm going to train, the behavior I want them to do is to give me eye contact, right? The first person I'm going to train using positive techniques. So every time that volunteer walked into the room, I said, every time she looked at me, I said, yes. And every time she looked away from me, I said nothing, right? I gave her no feedback. And within about 5 minutes or so, she was a bit of a ham, right? She came up and she had her head on my shoulder and she was looking dreamily into my eyes, and she figured out what I wanted her to do, right? That was great.
Yeah.
The second person that came in, it was actually, it was a male. And I figured that he would be, strong enough to try to do this, this technique with. And so every time he looked away from me, I said wrong. When he was looking at me, I said nothing. But when he looked away from me, I said wrong. And so I was saying wrong a bunch, which actually I found really hard to do because, you don't want to do that to somebody, right?
Yeah.
Within about the same amount of time, he also figured out what I wanted him to do. And he was standing about 6 or 8 feet away from me, and his eyes were boring into him. Like if we'd been on a dark street, I would have been afraid of him, right? So he was so angry.
Right, because you heard so much negativity, and even though he knew it was an experiment, it still affects your psyche and emotion. I totally get that. That is brilliant.
What a great
I cannot even verbalize how brilliant I think that is. And I just want to say this, it reminds me a little bit of something from a book, and actually a movie. There was a movie called What the Bleep. And there was a book that they cited an experiment from, which was that the human body is composed of mainly water, and it's called The Hidden Messages of Water. Anyway, some doctor took a bunch of different petri dishes with cells of water, and the ones that he spoke to positively and played like Mozart with and everything, they turned into these beautiful, almost like snowflake, crystallized, gorgeous cells. And the ones that he spoke negative to, Lee, I mean, this is water.
Yeah.
You're ugly, you're stupid, you're this, you're that. They looked sick, like yellowy and not formed well. that's what this just reminded
I
me
think
of.
they've even done it. Yeah, the guy's name is Masura Emoto. The movie is What the Bleep. Dr.
Yeah.
Joe Dispenza's in that movie. It's a classic movie. I love that movie. But you're right on all that, Val. I'm going to try and share it on LinkedIn.
I love that. I did a presentation on that for customers once because I couldn't believe it. And when you think about even our self-talk, a lot of times we have negative self-talk and we're all trying to work, beyond that and to stop doubting ourselves and things like that. But this is a great example because they knew it was an experiment and it still had that impact. So imagine what it's doing to our animals.
Right.
Oh man.
And when I asked both, both of the people whether they would do this experiment again, they both, he said, the one that I had punished said, I'm never doing that again. That was no fun.
Wow.
And the one that I had reinforced said she had a great time.
Yeah.
I actually ran it a second time so people could watch it, and the people that had wanted that didn't get to see it the first time could see it a second time, and the results the second time were a little different. The person that I punished, that I was saying wrong to, she by the end of it did not figure out what I wanted her to do, and she crumpled up on the floor. She just sat against the wall on the floor, just crumpled into herself and stopped behaving entirely.
Wow.
So that's also one of the problems with aversive training, with positive reinforcement. I mean, positive punishment is that you may inhibit behavior. So the problem is, so let's think about a fearful animal, right? So for instance, a dog who's scared of the sight of other dogs, right? And let's say that every time he expresses that fear, so he lunges, he barks, he growls, whatever, every time he expresses that fear, we give him, let's say, a leash correction to say, stop doing that. In the process, you may inhibit the behavior, but under the covers, you are not changing the dog's emotional response to the sight of dogs, right? And so, I would parallel this with, if let's say you're afraid of people wearing masks, right? And right now we have people around the streets wearing masks all the time, right? And if I wanted to make you feel better, if I wanted to solve your problem and every time you saw somebody with a mask, I slap you, right? I may inhibit your behavior. You may stop expressing yourself, right? But how do you feel about me? And how do you feel about people in masks? I've made you feel no better about them, right?
No, maybe even worse.
Right, I've made it worse. So, and the other problem is that, think about the dogs now, at some point, that dog's potentially won't be on leash. Like, so for instance, getting him to feel better about strangers, right? Dogs that have stranger issues. If I inhibit his behavior by giving him a leash correction or whatever it is, and then at some point, there's I drop the leash by mistake, or there's no leash on and somebody walks into the yard, whatever it is. Now that I have only compounded the issue, that dog is without a device to keep people safe.
Because the leash was the only thing that was doing, the protection piece. Now you've lost that mechanism.
Right.
So you haven't addressed the underlying symptoms or emotion or whatever is there. Wow.
It just makes me so sad when I think of all of these techniques, because I know I could never do it. I could never do that to my dog or any other dog. And what I don't understand, well, there's two things, but the people, I guess, who train that way or hire trainers such as this, they feel very strongly about it, right? And they're not so open-minded to positive reinforcement, or maybe they don't think positive reinforcement works. I don't really know. And the other thing that I just wanted to ask actually is regulation wise, right? Do you believe this industry needs regulation? I do. I feel like it's the Wild West, but I want to hear your thoughts on that too.
In terms of regulation?
Yeah, like having a standard, truck drivers can't drive a truck without a certain kind of license, right? And I just feel that, unfortunately, there really is not a lot of regulation on this industry. So if I today started marketing myself as a dog whisperer, which so many people love that term, but, I could get hired And if somebody said, oh, what's your experience in training? And I would just say something like, oh, I've trained my dog and I've given tips
Right.
and you know what I mean? Like, I really would love this industry to be treated more comparable to something that has standards, like in the
Yeah.
world of finance. You can't sell mutual funds or stocks or bonds without achieving certain tests. Real estate has a mandatory test that you have to take, and continuing education. Doesn't this industry need that?
So, so buyer beware, right? When you try to hire a dog trainer, make sure you're asking a lot of questions, and particularly asking them how they're going to train them, right? And ideally, the trainer shouldn't be training your dog. The trainer should be training you, because
Love
the
that.
thing is, when I obviously I work with private clients, and I want them never to need a trainer again. I want to teach them not only, I want to certainly leave them with a trained dog that they and I have trained together, right? That they've learned to train from me. But a year from now, that dog's behavior is going to change, especially, for instance, Tommy's dog's behavior, because, Cheeto's just a puppy now. In a year, he's going to be approaching maturity, right? He's going to need some retuning, So I want my clients to know how to train their dog themselves so they can solve those problems in the future, not so that they have to rely on going back to another trainer again.
Right.
I just got interrupted. Buyer beware. So talk about buyer beware. Check out this website, everybody. mywolfgang.com. MyWoofgang.com. I'm checking it out. Multitasking, but totally multitasking for the show and for the fact that I need a trainer. But you should be multitasking as well, gang. I'm going to put this out on Facebook, but check out Laura's website. Looks like there's a lot of resources here, and articles and different handouts and things like that, which my ADHD will force me to scour your entire website this evening, and I'll be working through some of this stuff. But I'd love to have a consult with you. What does that look like when somebody wants to, like, for instance, let's say they had a puppy who's like right now in the attic in his crate, and they wanted to talk to you. Like, let's role play. Hi, Laura. Hi.
What's the dog doing in the attic?
I'm in the attic. I'm in the attic. I operate from the attic. Those people in the know, Tommy D's in the attic. It's a long story, but he's in the attic with me right here. So, like, how does it work? What does an engagement look like? Do you say, well, I have to meet Cheeto? Like, what's that look like?
No. So firstly, I mean, you live pretty far away from me. So I do both in-person training and also remote training. So for instance, on Zoom. So you and I would have a Zoom session, for instance, and I would talk you through how to work on things. So you would have treats, I have a dog here that I use as my demo dog when I need one. And I would talk you through how to do different things and the principles of dog training.
I love that.
So that's how we do that. And, so back to Valerie's question earlier too, is why people choose not to do positive reinforcement. And because one of the questions people say is, or the things that give them pause about positive training is, well, I don't want to use treats for the rest of my life. I don't want to have, and when people say that, I say, if you have to use treats for the rest of your dog's life, you're doing something wrong, right? Because this is not about having treats on you all the time forever, right? Mm-hmm. When you're doing positive reinforcement training, what you're doing is you're building a happy history of a dog's behavior in particular situations. For instance, one of the things that's really important to me is being able to take my dog everywhere I go, right? If I want to go to an outdoor sidewalk cafe, I want my dog to be with me and I want her to be well behaved, right? Yeah. So one of the first things I taught her how to do was to lie down next to me at my feet when I'm sitting at a table, right? Mm-hmm. When I'm sitting down. In the beginning, you can imagine that I had to use a lot of treats to do that, right? Because that is not what she would prefer to do. She would prefer probably to run around and play with other dogs and do whatever, right? So I needed to incentivize that I wanted her to be lying quietly at my side. These now, do you think I take treats with me? My dog now is 7.5 years old. You think I take treats with me? I do, actually. I do. because I love her.
Yeah.
Because I love her. And if I'm eating at the table, I want her to have something to eat, right? You know, I'll take stuff out of my plate, give it to her from the table. But the
Yeah.
point is, I would never do that for a dog that's begging, right? I would never do that for a dog that's got his chin on my leg or whatever. That's begging behavior.
Well, you're incentivizing the wrong behavior then. You're rewarding the wrong behavior. I will tell you something about treats and snacks. I went to my son's lacrosse game yesterday and I was all by myself. So I got a box of Entenmann's cookies and I got a bag of pretzels. And I'm a snacker, so I didn't share with anybody. I sat there with my headphones on watching the game, having snacks. So I gotta tell you, treats are important. You don't have to go, but I incentivize my own good behavior. And I was like, Tommy D, if you sit here and you just watch the game quietly, you can have all the snacks you want. And that's how I do that sometimes.
I definitely hope you didn't share your chocolate chip cookies with your puppy, because that would be bad for him.
I would never do that because I don't share my chocolate chip cookies with anybody, but I certainly wouldn't share them with anybody.
I have to say, even though Jovi is now a senior dog, I kind of made a mistake recently, which I realized he actually trained me, because what would happen was he hates it when I'm like on the laptop in the dining room and he sees me on the computer and he starts huffing. I call it huff. He wants attention, and then eventually it'll grow into a bark.
Right.
And it'll get loud. So, you know, I was in the middle of like an intense email or whatever, and I just got up, and we have a flight of stairs. It's about 17 stairs. I took a cookie, threw it upstairs, and he went and got it. So now what happens? He comes back downstairs. Of
course.
And, you know, now he's expecting a cookie every time. So he barks, I throw a cookie, he runs up, gets it, comes back down, and I'm like, uh-oh, you know?
He's a good human trainer, right?
He's fantastic.
I told you, guys, we started the show saying it's not their behavior that's the problem. That's how
it does. 100%. 100%. I say it all the time. They train us very well.
So here's the thing that you need to do for that, right?
Tell me.
If you know that you're going to be on the computer or whatever, and you know you're going to be otherwise engaged, you have, let's take a puzzle toy, you know, like a licky mat or a calm toy or whatever. Get that all prepped and ready to go.
Right.
And have him working away at that while you're on your phone call or whatever it is.
100%. And that's exactly, you know, what I should do. I have to ask a selfish question. We have not solved the mystery in terms of getting our dog to get along with our cats, or maybe it's vice versa. I'm not sure. All I know is that we have a baby gate that separates them. I call it the cat wing. It's like 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a baby gate. And then Jovi has full run of the rest of the house. Every once in a while, a cat comes out of the cat suite, and there's an encounter. And although no one's actually ever hurt one another in the past, I don't want it to get to that, you know? So I mean, I could tell he's being playful because his tail is wagging and he's like all excited, but the cat is not. The cats are like ears back, they're growling.
Right.
And I'm having a heart attack because honestly, I think the cats would win. And like, you know, whether it's the nose or God forbid, scratch the eyes, I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Any advice on that? Can I make them be friends?
Yeah. So what first thing I would do is I would put a cover, like maybe a blanket or something over that divider, because the problem is that they're having like unplanned meetings every time they get up to that gate. On one side or the other, they're having these interactions that you are not a master of, right? That you are not setting up for them. So have something like a blanket or something over it so they can't see each other most of the time. And then when you're actually going to do some work on it, I would have one person on one side and one person on the other side. And the person that's on the dog side would be working on, have the dog on leash for one thing, so that he stays close to you, doesn't get too close to the barrier, right? And then just work on calm behaviors with some treats, calm behaviors like sits or downs, and just giving him treats for remaining polite and calm at the sight of the cats, right? And then the person on the side of the cats can be playing games with them, you know, maybe with one of those mousy toys or one of the fishing pole toys, whatever. But play some games over there, or you could be giving the cats treats, or if they're food motivated, you could be doing that. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to build a positive relationship between them. And every time they have these negative interactions, they're being reminded that the cats are being reminded certainly that they don't like being around the dog at all. And the dog's being reminded how very fun it would be to chase those cats.
I gotta ask you a question on that. And then we got one of our friends checking in on Facebook that I want to, so I see some people out there on Facebook. If you have any questions, check in with us and we can ask Laura for you live on the show. My quick thing is, do they, and I don't know if you know this but you can totally fib if you don't, I'll allow it. The fibbing is fine. But do these two animals, this interaction that Valerie's talking about, is it a species thing? That they don't like each other just generally because one's right? That's what I was thinking. So, so it's a personality thing or it's an exposure thing like you just referred to. So like, even if they were two separate cat populations in the home that get this weird interaction occasionally, the behavior may be similar. It's not because he's a dog and they're cats, right?
So, so the thing is, I mean, obviously there are some breeds of dogs that are more likely to have predatory drive.
Okay.
So for instance, terriers and dachshunds are more likely because they're bred to go to ground, right? To find little animals underground. Right. So they're going to be, they're ready to chase cats, right? However, I have a German Shepherd, right? And I adopted her when she was about 7 months old, I believe. Those first maybe 3, 4, 5 months, and I have 3 cats. Those first months, she was never off leash when the cats were around, never, right? And the whole time I had her on leash around the cats and I was teaching her polite, calm behavior. That way the cats weren't getting a bad experience being around the dog because she was always calm when they were around, right? And when I couldn't work on it, then the cats were at one part of the house and the dog was in her crate or whatever it was. Now these days, my cats love my dog, and they sleep together. They
and that's a result of you doing the work, though. That's a result of you getting them together and getting do stuff together. I mean, maybe they go on a date, maybe they see a movie together, walk, whatever. You gotta communicate, right? It's all about the communication at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and it's really about training right from the start, right?
I wanna go back to something that you just mentioned because I think it's really important to mention this. We talked about animals that are kind of, it's genetics, it's in their genes that they have a prey drive, a predatory drive, I believe you call it. One of the things I found very upsetting was a couple of years ago, the town of Oyster Bay, which borders Hempstead, they passed a resolution and they talked about basically making it easier for them to euthanize when an animal has a prey drive. They call it a prey drive. And I have to say, I found that to be very disturbing because, again, there are animals that are bred specifically for their ability to find and locate poodles. Poodles are known for they're bird dogs, right? They hunt.
Water dogs, yeah.
Yeah, we've mentioned, I mean, there's fox hunts and, the foxhounds, I'm trying to remember the specific breed, but regardless, just because a dog has a prey drive does not mean that they're not worth living their life,
That's right. And it also does not mean that they can't be given other alternative behaviors that will satisfy that behavior so that they can safely live in a city, right? In a city environment or around other animals, right?
Right.
So,
right.
The thing is, all of our breeds were bred to do work, right? I mean, German Shepherds, I got a German Shepherd. She was bred to herd sheep. There are no sheep where I live. So, so I employ her using other techniques, right? Our past German Shepherd used to herd the waves, so there are all sorts of things you can do that can be creative. It's fun for human and animal and dog to
Yeah.
figure out other ways of using those, predestined or bred instincts. Yeah.
Yes, I love that so much. Getting back to the science part, what would you, I mean, my wish, and it's a big one, but my wish, if we're talking about overall scenarios with municipal shelters, is that they will embrace and incorporate positive reinforcement training. That's what I think everyone wants who really loves and cares for animals. We don't want to see them get punished. We don't want to see them afraid of us. I mean, what a horrible way to live. Anyway, but scientifically, let's get back to that if we can. Just what would you say if I said to you, I just don't think it's going to work on especially the more difficult dogs, the behaviorally challenged dogs that resource guard and are reactive, or what would you say to that?
So I'm so glad that you brought this up, because shelter work is really my passion, right? And my specialty. And so let's talk about, I mentioned earlier about all of the ways that dog welfare suffers as a result of using punishment-based training. So let's revisit those, because let's figure out why those would not be in the best interest of a shelter dog. So first we talked about dogs suffering from higher stress and higher cortisol levels. Dogs that are in shelters are already suffering from high stress and high cortisol levels, right? So we're just giving them more, right? By using punishment-based behavior, punishment-based training. The other problem is, by the way, that positive training, not everybody is as good a trainer one to another, right? The problem is that punishment-based training is so reliant on absolutely perfect timing, right? If you are even 2 seconds or 3 seconds late on a punishment, you have just punished a dog for he has no idea why.
They don't know why.
Like totally gone, right? Like, see,
He has no idea why.
how quick? Like seconds?
Seconds.
Oh, wow.
So the problem is that when we're talking about shelter settings, right, we have multiple people handling that animal, staff, volunteers, adopters, right? And if you're using a punishment-based training technique, you're relying on multiple people with varying amounts of competency to be meeting out these training techniques, right? So that's another reason. Then we talked about impeded learning and inquisitive behavior, but the problem is that dogs that are in shelters and dogs that are just after they're adopted, that is going to be one of the most challenging times of their lives, right? That's a big change to go from a shelter to a home.
Yeah.
They need to be primed and ready to learn because they need to fit into a family household quickly. In order to really, for that adopter to bond to them. But if they're going to have impeded learning, that's going to be to their deficit, right? They show less playful and interactive behaviors. The problem is that dogs need to interact with the public in order to attract adopters to adopt them, right?
A big challenge. Like what, I just interrupt 1 second. Like I'm under a ton of stress, right? And I'm trying to get adopted and people just keep like maybe hollering at me and I don't even know why they're hollering at me. And I'm supposed to be performing because I want somebody to get me the hell out of this place. Like I'm in this orphanage, right? Then hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Like do tip the cap, do the whole show, right? But I'm totally stressed out. I mean, this wow, how the heck did they get adopted, right? That's so much.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that most behavior departments and shelters in the country, 21st century shelters, are using positive techniques.
Okay.
So that is the way sheltering is going.
Good.
Amen.
There
Thank
are
God.
studies.
Not all of them, unfortunately.
There are studies that show that a dog that plays with an adopter is more likely to go home that day.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so for instance, and you know how it is, some dogs like to play with balls, some dogs like to tug, whatever. But those dogs, if they engage in play with those adopters, are more likely to go home that day. But if a dog, if their playful behavior is impeded by the fact that they have been trained using punishment, that's not going to help them either.
Can I just ask a quick question, kind of unrelated here? Is there a drummer in the house? What's going on? I just have to ask. It sounds like
There's a dumpster outside and they just started dumping stuff into
Ah.
it.
I
I'm
was
so
trying to
sorry.
figure it out. I'm like, is someone banging on my?
Laura, that was a
Oh,
perfect opportunity for you and me to say we didn't hear anything. And
We didn't hear anything.
everything
No.
was perfect. That would have been perfect. That would have just been like,
Tommy put in the chat box, is there an earthquake? I'm like,
I'm sorry. I don't know what to
No,
do
no,
about
it's
it. It's
okay.
right outside the window.
It's not horrible. I just had to know because I'm just a very curious person.
super.
Is there a study? I'm curious to know if there was a study done that would compare the percentage of returned dogs versus like, so if you're at a shelter and let's say you have 1,000 dogs adopted out in a year, and there's they use negative reinforcement training, and you compare it to a shelter that has 1,000 dogs and uses positive reinforcement training, I would imagine the surrenders would be higher at a place that incorporates negative reinforcement training. But I don't know if is there a study like that?
You mean punishment? Yeah, no, punishment training.
Yeah.
So there are no studies on that.
Okay.
There are no studies. The studies that were done were on pet dogs and also on police dogs. But there are no studies comparing positive training versus aversive training in shelter environments. No, there aren't.
Okay.
What I can tell you though is that good positive behavior programs can affect return rates. So one of the large programs that I built was for the Pennsylvania SPCA in Philadelphia, and the first year I was there, before I came, they had a 25% adoption rate of return.
Wow.
After
Wow.
the first year of being there, it dropped to 12%, and after my second year of being there, it dropped to 7%. So that shows you that, that's not answering your question about using punishment-based training, but it is telling you that in
It's close. Yeah.
with a cohesive program, absolutely, you can change. Yes.
We have a question from an audience member. Please ask her how important it is to train shelter staff and positive reinforcement. I'm assuming that means train shelter staff to use positive reinforcement. I would also imagine, I'm sorry, I don't want to answer for you, but I just have to say this. If I were a staff member at a shelter, I would also have to imagine, because it is a very tough place to work. It's depressing. I would have to imagine that a positive reinforcement experience would be better for the mental well-being of the staff as well.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So anyway, she wants to know, please ask her how important it is to train shelter staff with positive reinforcement.
Well, it's crucial because, so we've talked about the fact that dogs, just in general, being in a shelter, they are under stress, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important that people, that volunteers and staff understand how to safely also handle these animals, right? For their safety and for the safety of the animals, right?
Yeah.
And that is only magnified when you're talking about using now aversive techniques, right? Because we talked about how that just increases the stress.
Yeah.
It also increases behavior problems and increases the potential for aggression, right? These dogs are trying to be adopted, right? These dogs are living in a stressful situation. So if they're going to have behavior problems and show aggression because of using punishment-based training,
Yeah.
it's just compounding the problem.
I have to imagine that if I were a canine, I would probably be the dog that would act out in response to this negative reinforcement training. I know this, everyone who knows me knows this about me. You do not give me an ultimatum, because no matter what it is, I will dig my heels in and go the opposite direction. And I've proven that very publicly. You know,
You don't want her to be growling at you, is what she's saying. Everybody. You don't want that.
I would. I mean, who wants this? Nobody wants this. But I guess ultimately, my point is this: you cannot hurt someone or something that you care about without hurting yourself too.
Wow.
So I really believe, you know what I'm saying? That the knife cuts both ways. So it's like if you're
right.
imposing punishment onto a sentient being, such as a dog or a cat or whatever, you are also hurting yourself.
Yeah, Val, no, and Laura, isn't it also this situation? Let's talk about evolution for a second. Evolution is us as a species. You know, when you talk about, we had, Assembly Member Rosenthal on the program last week, and we were talking about just like dogs, animals, companion animals are considered property from a legal perspective, right? So they're considered not often people, and I've joked with you live on the show and in other places, like I am not a fur parent, right? You're it just with anyhow,
Hi, fur dad.
I got a puppy. All right. I have human children. All right. I got a puppy. He's my guy, Cheeto, but I'm not a fur parent. But the point of the matter is but he is my guy. I'm not going to beat him up. I'm not going to yell at him. Right. So, but we are evolving, I believe, as a species in the way we treat animals. So the point of the matter is, or at least some of us are, the point of the matter is this behavior that we're talking about, this aversive punishment style, it's old school. Right. It doesn't mean that it's going to if you need to stop a train that is going 80 miles down the railway, it doesn't stop immediately. Right. Like you pump the brakes or you push the brakes and it doesn't stop. So this is, I think, one of those things that it's about learning, educating, and advocating. And that's how you turn something. Right. I don't know why the Titanic is coming in, but it would take a lot to turn the Titanic. It takes a lot to slow down this train. What happened? You looked at the time, you realized quick an hour goes. So when we are learning and educating folks, I think that's what Laura, I would think you would say the same. Like we got to just continue to be in the fight and train people and teach people the right way to do this. I mean, my friend Diane Madden keeps checking in on Facebook and she says, yes, this industry needs to be regulated because the animals, not only for the animals, but for their guardians as well. That's a callback to something Val said earlier. And she said, she goes, thank you so much for this education, Laura, because you're educating us on the consequences of these two different things. What's it, Robert Frost, to fork in the road, path less traveled, the whole thing.
Oh, very good. Wow.
I have a lot of knowledge. I'm sort of a Renaissance man, or a Renaissance. One of those guys. But look,
Edgar Allan Poe next. No, but
I'm a big.
I have to try to. I'm sorry. I have to just try to squeeze in one more question, if it's okay with everybody. I know.
You have to respond to Tommy saying he's not a pet parent, though.
No, I'm not like a fur parent. I don't.
Well, so here's what I want to say, though, is that in fact, when dogs look at us lovingly, it's called the virtual hug.
Yeah.
And the reason and what a virtual hug is that when dogs look at you, gaze at you lovingly, actually what's happening in their system is that oxytocin is being given off in their system and in your system.
You have no idea how bad I need that oxytocin. To be honest, I'm not even kidding now. I'm being serious.
The bonding hormone, right? The mothering hormone.
I'm all about hugs, so I get it. So
what's incredible about that is here is a species different from ours that actually causes the same hormone to be given off that our children do.
That's amazing. See,
you made me.
You are a fur dad.
Look at this guy. Cheeto, say hi to everybody. I couldn't get Cheeto on the show last week because he had just had a shot and he was whimpering. But look, this is my guy right here. You're 100% right, Laura. He's so fun. And when we went to Dunkin' Donuts before, I brought him in and I was holding him like this and he was nuzzling and looking up at me. So this is a family dog, but he's pretty much my dog. Let's be honest.
I cannot wait to meet him. I'm going to squeeze in this last question because it is super important. We discussed this a little bit with Assembly Member Rosenthal. What is the connection between mishandling animals and abuse towards people?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't speak to that, but I do believe that that there are studies that show that those who abuse their animals are more likely to continue the abuse towards family members as well.
Yes.
And I don't know what the numbers of that are,
Well, I'll tell you something too. Very exciting. Assembly Member Rosenthal is introducing legislation that is going to create a registry, an animal abuse registry. And also the tandem part of that bill is that if you're on that registry, you cannot purchase a gun.
Yeah.
So I find that to be very exciting and necessary. Look at this guy. I can't take
Now,
it.
look at his face. Do you see his face?
I know, of course. You distracted me. All right, listen,
I
I
know
love
you-
Cheeto. I'm going to meet
serious.
him soon. And I'm telling you, I really feel he's part dachshund. He just really looks like
feel
the
like
head
Do
of
a
him.
DNA test.
You might feel that, but all I'm feeling is oxytocin with my guy.
Oh, yay.
We do have to go. Laura, shout out how they get in touch with you, how they follow you, the whole thing.
So my website is mywolfgang.com, and I'm on Facebook at Wolfgang Dog Training. And I post every day with something educational about dogs and clients I'm working with, and the dogs, the issues they're working on. So
And Cheeto's going to be on that page soon.
Well, this is what
Papa.
I'm saying. I texted my wife like totally during the show, totally multitasking. And I texted her and I was like, dude, check out this website. This is who we're interviewing, our new friend Laura. So like being that he's on Instagram, once you do some work with him, then he'll be shouting you out on Instagram and the whole thing.
awesome. Cheeto's my new best friend.
Such a mush.
Cheeto.
Such a
We
mush.
call him Cheeto Burrito. And he
Guys,
looks
we
like
call
a
him that too. You
Dorito.
know how that goes. We changed his name like 6 times already. All right, we do have to go. 'cause
Okay,
actually,
okay, I know.
what
All
else?
right.
Val, one last comment quickly, because I got to go pick up some people.
Yeah, no, Laura, thank you. It's just been an incredible opportunity to learn so much from you, and I just want to commend your professional achievements and all that you do so that you're helping to make the world a better place for the animals.
No big deal, just changing the world. Laura, we appreciate you. We're appreciative that you are a friend of the show, and we leave you, as we do with every episode of Professionals and Animal Lovers Show, with this quote: "The greatness don't bite my fingers, Cheeto. That's not the quote. The greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated." Hug your animals, get some oxytocin. Have a great day. See you guys later. Bye.
Thank you. Yay, Gandhi.